What is good, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us once again on another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. Friends, hopefully you guys enjoyed our last Level Up series. That is completed. If you have not listened to that series of like 4 or 5 episodes or something like that, go back and give it a listen because it's a really solid, stellar series especially for those who want to actually level up. But we're back to kind of our morning, or not the morning routine, but our regular routine of just having conversations about what's happening. So
the batch brew part is kind of a morning routine. Honestly, the question for you, Mark, is: do you brew batch brew at home?
I don't have a batch brewer.
So
I'm waiting for a fellow to send me my Aiden, but
oh, really? Nice. That's awesome. You're on
I mean, not
Aiden
my Aiden, but.
I was gonna say I brew batch brew quite a bit. I love the ratio 6. Maybe I need to move to the 8N at some point. Is it out yet?
No,
officially? No. Okay,
it's out in September, I think.
Oh,
so
cool. We've got time to decide. Yeah.
Still plenty of time. But I saw some cheaper-ish ratios on Facebook Marketplace. I wanted to cop
really
like $150
for a ratio 6.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that's
which is
deal.
Like a good deal. That's like,
yeah.
I don't know, what do they go for right now? $3.99
or
$2.99?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, which
3
is
something.
Like
yeah,
half off of a
that's a good
killer
deal.
batch brew.
Yeah, I love my ratio 6. Can't complain. That's nice. No, not a good brew.
I don't know why it's piping hot today. It's just like boiling.
Mm-hmm. That's very hot.
Yeah. I realized, actually, I don't know if there's like a science behind this. So if somebody's listening to this and gets it, maybe you guys can comment. But I feel like batch brews taste much better when they're cooled down instead of they're hot, as opposed to like a pour over. You can drink it like off brew and it's like it can be enjoyable. Yeah. But I feel like, I don't know, batch brews just have like a more intense wave of development. I don't know. I
wonder if batch brews are just hotter when they come off of brew.
Why?
I don't know.
If you're brewing a pour over with higher temp.
Possibly, yeah.
Or maybe it's all the water that helps it. I don't know.
That's all I'm wondering. I would want to measure the temp of a batch brew versus the temp of a pour over. See the difference. I would imagine that the batch brewers would be a little cooler than a pour over. That's what I would imagine.
That's what I would think too.
But who knows? You never know. If you never experimented, classic. Thoughts? I think it's over extracted. That's why. I think I went a little too fine on it. I wanted to get some more out of it.
Is this just one coffee?
Yeah.
You didn't blend 2 coffees together?
No. It's kind of a bad brew. I think I spoiled it.
It's not the greatest brew, but it still has a lot of complexity, I think.
Yeah.
It's
a good coffee.
It's got passion fruit. It's got
I think it has some tangerine on it.
Yeah, I was thinking like orange. At one of my sips I got orange on. It's still like the acidity or that passion fruit, like the tart in there is pretty punchy, and that's what I like about this coffee is that it gets you. Like it's very clear, it's very vibrant.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, I think the brew could have been a little better, but even with what it is, it's. I mean, it's great. I'm assuming this is the geisha.
Yeah. I've been brewing this coffee a lot at home too.
You have? Nice.
Yeah, it's nice. I like it a lot.
On batch or?
No, not on batch. Just on V60. It's been nice. Yeah.
One of the perks of owning a roasting company is you can brew geishas on batch. Brew a liter of geisha.
Yeah, I mean, we sometimes do that in narrative too, but
yeah,
that's it's not a common thing. Rarely, actually, unless there's some leftover batch, like leftover doses that are not enough for filter. Yeah.
But
I think I've been brewing the Miller on batch way more than any other coffee.
Okay.
And it's been good. It's a solid coffee.
Yeah, I haven't been drinking that too much. I've been drinking more the Francie and the geisha.
Nice.
Whenever I get, we had like one of the older roasts that I was just pulling espresso on at home. That's all I was drinking for like a month straight of like in one of our dial-in batches. That was like not the best, but on espresso, it's still ripped. Like a 18 in, like 50 out.
Dang.
In like 21 seconds.
It was
kind of wild, but
what a recipe, dude.
It was very tasty.
Yeah.
So
what a recipe.
Yeah, but this is nice. Even as it's not nice, the brew that is, but as it cools, there's like I'm getting like hints of like that, like maybe raspberry or the kind of reminiscent of that like Diego Bermudez fruit. Not that he owns a fruit, but I mean, it's like the classic thing. Like it's the fruit that if you taste any Diego's coffees, it literally tastes like it.
Yeah. The Level Up series was fun. And it also got me thinking, it's like, it's hard to, I think the way we formatted the whole series, the way we just delivered the series was really about people who are wanting to level up. So they're in a place where they're ready to level up. They're more or less wondering like what are the steps I need to take? How do I do this? You know? And that's one place. Like if you're in that place, that's awesome. You're already ahead of the curve. And that's why we started the whole breakdown with curious, because if you're wanting to level up, you're curious, and what are some areas you can be curious in. But I think as I processed us doing that episode, I'm thinking like, that's one thing. Like, what about people on your team or in your life, or what if that's you who doesn't want to level up? What happens in that? And I think a lot of the times from like a quote unquote managing perspective, like we're owners of a coffee company. I also manage a cafe. Like from our perspective, like what do you do? So if like someone's listening and they're a manager or owner, or if they are in a form of leadership, like what do you do? And where do you start with the idea of like, oh, I want my baristas to want to level up? Like, how do you create that desire? And I think one of the most underrated things is understanding, and we've mentioned this throughout other episodes, we sprinkled this. So this is kind of the bigger context of what I want to share within this kind of training and investing into your team topic, is like understanding your team's like life currencies, right? Understanding like what your actually employees want to get out of a job. Because if your employee is not wanting to level up, there has to be an area within the context of their job and the cafe that they want to be better at, or they want to do, right? It might not be in the same area that you want as a manager or as an owner, but it's within the context of what they want. And so like, what are those things? How can you figure those things out? And then understanding that the importance of those things is that, one, if you tap into that, you can have very good employee retention that's going to benefit your business straight up, right? You're going to be able to give your employees more than just like a paycheck. Give your employees more than just a quote unquote skill and how to pull espresso. And that's one thing. Is like, I think everybody can pull espresso. That's an easy part. But actually creating the dynamic of being a good barista or being a good employee, being hardworking, those are different traits that take way more time. So I think within that context of understanding your employees' life currencies and then also investing into training is a key factor in helping your team or helping someone within leadership to level up or to even want to level up. You know, sorry, I'm rambling because there's like so much on my mind around this topic, because recently I started coaching someone in latte art, and probably some people like Nate is listening to this episode and he's thinking, why are you coaching? You're not even that good. Fair. I'll give him that. Nate, fine. You're way better than me. You should start a freaking coaching mastermind group in Top Hearts. Like, I get that. But I had an opportunity. Someone reached out and was like, dude, like, I'd like to get some coaching. What would it cost? How can we do this? So I started coaching this person. And that's also part of this idea of like, one, investing into training. This person went, I don't know who paid for this training, but this person went out of their comfort zone to reach out to me and to be like, hey, I want you to train me. Like, I'm like, how? Like, where's this energy coming from? Like, why do you want to invest your own time and finances? But come to find out, like, this is a very important value in their life. Like, they want to get better at that. So it made me think like, hey, we can't underestimate the power of training. And I think we need to continually invest into our team through those kind of things. Long rant. I don't know. That was like 2-minute rant. Just me monologuing.
The people will take it.
What do you think, dude?
Give the people what they want. I'm thinking, I don't know why you haven't trained me on latte art. That's what I'm confused about.
Dude,
You're training Billy Joe Bob down the street, and I'm still pouring the most trash things ever.
Easy. I'm
trying to pour with that crusty stock Breville pitcher.
Dude, why don't you buy a pitcher?
It's the worst. I've been trying to, but then I'm like getting overwhelmed by like the 100 like why am I paying for this $100 pitcher? Tell me why. Is it
it's not like
what's it gonna do? Turn my milk into who knows what? Like I don't know.
That's fair enough.
It's the craziest thing. I'm like, I don't even know. Do I want a narrow, a round spout, or a jumbo spout, a thin, slim Jim? I don't know what the. Anyways, yeah. I think it's one thing to create a space for. It's one thing to be able to like from like a manager, maybe like owner perspective, like I think it's one thing to do everything you can to create a space that makes people want to level up. Mm-hmm. Like that's something you should take accountability over, but also realizing that there are times when you can do everything in your power. And if somebody is just like, yo, I'm just here, just because I think I need to exist today, or I need a job, or then and they just don't want to, then that's also an option. So not to say, that like that guy that, whoever that was that reached out to you about latte art, like that coming in with that energy is already so beneficial. You're already 10 steps ahead in your, the effectiveness of your training and investment into somebody. So
totally. But also within that context, you have to, I think most leaders need to understand, especially within the coffee industry, is like coffee and working in cafes still has the idea that this is not a long-term career.
Yeah.
Most people don't apply to be a barista because they're like, I'm going to be a barista till I'm 60. Mm-hmm. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. And that's like totally, that's normal. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the folks that I've trained and that I've worked with have basically moved on from being a barista to either a cafe owner. Mike is a good example of that, right? Mm-hmm. Or went into some kind of management or a different avenue. Like, I don't know if I told you, remember Trey? Trey, not Trey Brockman, Trey Madsen. He's actually going to school for being a coffee tech,
nice.
Like right now. And to me, that's very like insightful and like influential in my leadership as someone who owns a coffee company, but also someone who runs a cafe. Like that's very insightful to me because I'm thinking Trey came into working at the cafe simply one, he thought it was fun. He needed a job. Kind of thing.
Right. Some
things didn't work out. Some things changed. He wanted a job. He never drank specialty coffee, right? But there was something passed on to him throughout working alongside me and other staff. The passion, the idea is like, oh, coffee is more than just, making this quick beverage through espresso or batch brew and just getting caffeinated. It led him to the point where his curiosity took him to being and wanting to be a coffee tech. And that happens, that kind of impartation, what you can impart into a...
I never thought you'd use that word on this podcast.
Dude.
I'm so sorry. You guys, I'm so sorry. Anyways, okay. Yes.
Yeah. Mark, are you gonna leave this in the pot or are you gonna cut it out?
I don't know. We'll see in the editing bay.
No, what I'm saying is like that kind of like just instilling into a person helps them to
yes, that kind of impartation. It helps.
Yeah. It creates the drive to continually want to stay in coffee. And I think the importance of that is, one, a lot of coffee companies that a few that I've worked with have always said that training is so expensive. Training is way too expensive. Like, how can we train quicker? And rarely do I hear folks say, how can we train better? It's more or less, what can we do for the least amount of money to get them started so that they can generate revenue? That makes sense, right? If you and I would want to hire someone, or you and I in a place of like us even trying to figure out how you and I are getting paid, like we're always thinking of like, okay, how much money can we invest to get a good ROI? Common, right? It's like 1 + 1 = 2 kind of stuff. Yes. And I get that. But I think a lot of the times within that context, we lose the benefit of like, hey, if you train someone really, really well, like if you take from doing 2 shadow shifts to maybe 3 shadow shifts, and all of a sudden that person feels way more adequate at their job or in their role at the cafe, they are going to want to stick around longer, right? So therefore, investing more into training down the line equals quote unquote cheaper or less money that you lose by retraining the same other people in the same thing over and over again. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, if you're cheaping out on training, I get it. You know, you were in the coffee industry where you kind of do have to play the very economical penny pinch game and be very, very tight. I mean, in all businesses you should be tight on that, but but it also just doesn't really make sense in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
Because I mean, one of your biggest assets in a business is just the people. Yeah. And the people is what's driving the whole business. So why would you cheap out on investing to get a better ROI back? Why would you cheap out on one of the biggest things that you can actually invest in to get the ROI back? Right. If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes total sense. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think the keys within training is the fact that if you do a good job training, and if you do a good job investing in your team, which those are kind of 2 different things. Like training can be simple as like, hey, you pull out your portafilter out of the group head, you stick it into the grinder, you grind some coffee beans, you distribute tamp, and you pull espresso. Sick. You know how to pull espresso now. That's one thing. That's like very practical, legitimate, quote unquote training. But investing into your team is taking that to another level, is explaining how and why these things work, to give insight. And investing in your team allows you and allows your team to be able to make better decisions down the line. So instead of them just following a cookie cutter recipe, like this is what I need to do to get brown juice, you're actually telling them why this works. Therefore, they're being able to make more decisions. And why is that important? Is because down the line, as those baristas or employees or as folks who are working within your team are able to do that better, they're going to feel better about themselves. Morale is going to grow. And then overall team satisfaction, like you're going to want to come to work because one, you feel like you can handle it. If there's a rush coming through, you feel like you can handle that rush. You can kill it and you can have a good time. Like, why wouldn't you want to show up to work, right? It's been so many years that I've worked behind the bar and I still look forward to dialing in a new coffee. You know what would suck and what would be absolutely boring? If I showed up to work and I never had to dial in a coffee again and it was the same blend for the last 6 months. That would be a different... My morale wouldn't be as high as when I walk into a cafe and I'm like, oh, okay, like what coffee do I want? Right? That's morale boosting. And it's not only morale boosting that I get to pick the coffee, I'm fully equipped to make a good decision on how I get to serve that coffee. That's key. Now, again, like that's my position situation. I understand that not every cafe runs that kind of program. I get that. But I think also from a roasting perspective, like it would be really, really boring if all you and I served was Jorge Mendes and we never had to dial in a coffee again. It'd also be very, very challenging if you and I always had to guess on how to dial in a coffee because we weren't equipped and we weren't invested to by our mentors, right? So that investment, like even you and I, when we started running Mir, we had to invest into training, not for someone else, not for an employee, but we had to invest into training for us, which then gave us that basically confidence, that morale boost to be able to like, hey, we can down the road buy a geisha and dial it in and be confident about it. You see what I mean? Are you tracking there with that kind of flow? Yeah. And I think a lot of the times that's underestimated. I have been in meetings with cafe owners who said, hey, can you not train off hours? Like, can you just not train? Can you just train on hours? Like, just give them your shift and just tell them what to do so they can automatically bring revenue. And most of the time that has always backfired.
Yeah. It's probably because I'm assuming they're just expecting, how do you get, again, the biggest bang for your buck? How do you be the most productive with the time that you have? But you're also then cutting yourself short of the quality of, training, of the attention to detail, of the depth, as opposed to just the width of like, hey, put the portafilter in,
stuff.
You do this, and great. You can probably train that maybe on the fly, but anything below that or deeper than that is kind of, it's very limiting in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, on top of that, it's like, it's awful for guest satisfaction.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, if you come in and you're a very curious guest, like you want to find out like, more about the coffee, or you ask these questions, and a barista, untrained and uninvested in barista, simply says like, you know what, I don't know, you should ask my manager. That sucks. That sucks for both parties. That sucks for whoever is working behind bar, or whoever is like, I mean, imagine if we had a salesperson that was selling coffee, but then someone asked them a question and they're like, you should just ask the owner. I don't really know anything about that. I don't think that would secure a quote unquote sale. Right. 100%. It's like, you want to make sure that when someone's delivering your product on every level, that they feel confident and equipped. And if they don't know something, which is okay, I don't know everything about every single coffee.
Right.
But I also know where I can get access to that information. And I don't have to cop out by saying like, I don't know this, like someone else, ask someone else. I can say, hey, let me find this out. Right? There is a progress where you get to take ownership of that, and you actually get to deliver good and satisfying a guest experience. And that's beneficial for any business, any coffee company. I mean, I bet that would be you would have good insight on like how that would be beneficial as a cinematographer and working with a client, right? Like, imagine if you had to answer a client about some social media question or some video thing by saying like, I don't know, ask Peter McKinnon. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't work. That's not beneficial. And I think investing in people to be able to make those decisions, the ROI long-term wise is like monumental. Like, it's very, very big. It's hard to calculate, right? And I think a lot of the times for leaders and cafe owners, that's where they underestimate it, because you might not see immediate like, revenue went up by 4% or 5%. You might not see that, but the reality is it is there. Yeah, you're building trust. Like, there's so many. I mean, I guess I'm sorry. I'm just ranting here. There's so many times where people come in to the cafe and they're like, oh, this coffee, that's expensive. Or even like, I've been talking to a lot of people about our geisha, and they're like, dude, that's a pricey coffee. Yeah. But you know why people buy the geisha, especially when I talk to people, is because they're like, dude, I trust you. I trust what you say. And you have an expertise and a knowledge that I can take your word for it and buy a coffee that's a little out of my budget. I mean, my friend Cody just recently bought the Francie. Coffee is not necessarily a cheap coffee. Why did he buy it? It's because, dude, he's like, I trust your opinion. And
Yeah.
you create that trust by feeling more equipped, having bigger like morale, and knowing, quote unquote, what you're talking about or what you're doing.
Yeah. Honestly, I think, I don't know, just for myself, if you're a manager or a coffee shop business owner or coffee owner, like that last bit that you talked about buying the geisha and building the trust, is like, I think even if you just listen to that and then you really took that in, I think like that's like enough value outside of the rest of the 30 minutes, because that's really the basis of any business running,
Right.
any coffee stuff like that. Yeah, it's just like it's the foundation, it's the backbone, it's everything. And if you can multiply that trust amongst all your team,
Yep.
and instill that into yourself and instill that into, if you're trying to scale in the future, and instilling that into your, your managers, the people that oversee, like, I mean, that's
also like how brand grows, right?
Well, I didn't want to use that word, but I was refusing to use that word, but just not to overcomplicate things. But yeah, that's the brand, is that if you, brand is literally people associating you with something.
Yep.
And when you are associated with something, hopefully it's something really, really good, then that gives you the leverage and the power to be able to direct people in a way that might get a coffee out the door, or whatever it is. So I don't know, even like the fact that like some wholesale accounts who, cafe owners who have listened to the podcast, for me to reach out to you and send you samples, we're already on the same page in so many different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
So just a little anyways.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's really good, because if the goal is to like build trust, the question is like, how do you do that, right? Is you invest into your team. Like investing into your team and actually creating, even taking a farther step back to our series, right? Creating a team that wants to level up by investing in your team will always result in building more trust with your guests. That's my through line. That's how it works. And I think that's key, and that's a lot of the time that's underestimated, again, because I meet so many owners who don't want to invest into training. They don't. And that's sad. And I think that once you create that kind of infrastructure of where your company invests into people, training, and other things, that those life currencies that we mentioned in the beginning, if you create that kind of culture and that kind of energy within your context, you will definitely see trust built with the guest. That definitely has a direct correlation to a higher ROI, right? Or an ROI. So where do you start with all of this? I think one of the cool things is, again, we've talked about staff meetings, having one-on-ones with people, this and that. But I think a cool thing would be to see people that have the potential in leadership, that have that curiosity already, investing into those people, and even allowing them like, hey, like, Susie this week is going to actually share about our new coffee that we're serving. Or Susie this week has been like cupping all these coffees, is really stoked on this coffee. Won't you share about this coffee? Is giving that sort of quote unquote platform, and also creating that sense of ownership where other people who are not quote unquote leaders by title are able to invest into the team. And there's a lot of benefit to that across the board. One, you are building ownership without creating and giving a title. That's key, because leadership is not a title. We all know that. But how does that look like? It looks like allowing people to just step up in quote unquote staff meeting, allowing people to educate and invest into others. And then that also inspires you, the rest of your team, being like, oh, like maybe I'm curious about this. What can I do? I remember even back in the day when I was at Makeworth, Reese, a buddy of mine, he still works in coffee. He works at Banter. I just saw a meal the other day and we talked about how wonderful Reese is. Reese baked cookies for a Christmas party one day. That act of baking cookies for a Christmas party led him to be the baker for Makeworth. And I think stuff like that, again, investing into your team and giving that platform. He baked cookies for a staff meeting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's exactly, like, that's a very easy, like, how do you get this culture going? How do you move in this kind of direction where you get to invest in your team? Give your teammates, and if you're a leader, give people who you have an ability to invest in, give them that platform. Allow them to do that kind of stuff.
Is there any other practical things?
Definitely. I think from that, I was wondering if you had any feedback on that, but I think from that, it's like, okay, like, that's very easy. That doesn't cost you anything, right? Just seeing someone who has the potential and then allowing them to do that. I think the other thing that, again, people shy away and business owners shy away from is actually creating a training budget. Like, I think you need to think about that, because at the end of the day, you're going to hire people, you're going to train people. And if people are not growing on your team, if they're not getting better at their craft, if they're not able to, like, actually be invested into, you need money for those things. And if they're not able to because you don't have the budget for it, you're going to spend money somewhere else. So creating that little bit of budget. And I think taking that even further would be like, of course, like, I mean, you and I have talked about this, like, hey, once we get a different space for our roastery, like, imagine if we had like a little training facility where we had an espresso machine and we had like all of the other things that are not necessary for a roasting facility, but could be more of like a lab. You know what I mean? That's always the dream. And I think a lot of people talk about that. And I've been talking about that with other business owners. Like, yeah, there is a benefit to that. Of course, that's going to take more finances, and not every startup cafe can do that.
Right.
You know, but then again, within even that context is the idea of like, hey, how, what's the benefit of having, sometimes, again, for the sake of finances, we see a lot of the times that owners will do like batch training, where they bring in a bunch of staff and kind of train them together and give this broad overview. Hey, here's a pamphlet of how we brew coffee. Here's what a pour over is. And basically, like, watch me do it, done, walk away, without actually allowing that kind of almost like peer-to-peer, that quote-unquote one-on-one training, where you sit down with a person and you actually watch and walk through what they're doing and how it's causing them to create this result in their pour over or their espresso or this and that. Even today, like, I've been shadowing, and sometimes it feels like when you're on a shadow shift, sometimes it feels like you're wasting labor hours, right? You're literally one person just watching.
Yeah.
But the way that empowers that one-on-one training allows for so much more practicality, where you can maybe if you're doing a batch training and there's like 5 different people, all the 5 of those different people are going to be doing or making a mistake or doing something good different than all the other folks. So you're not able to be so tactical and so precise in that training and investing into people that way. And I think that's also key. Like, and there's a give and take within that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, another thing, I'll keep going, dude. It's how to get started. Another thing is finally like external training. Like, there's stuff that you can do in-house, stuff that you can do, you know, have like either, like I said, like a lab, or have like a training budget or something. But external training is also beneficial, because you've probably experienced this. I have. It's like, there's one thing when you hear it from, let's say, your parents, like your parents say, hey, don't do this, or you should do this. You're like, oh yeah, whatever. But then you hear it from someone you look up to,
Right.
and all of a sudden it hits different.
Right.
And all of a sudden you believe it. And all of a sudden you're able to execute on it. You're like, dude, mom and dad would always look at you and be like, dude, I told you that all your life. Like, why didn't you do it? Yeah. And you're like, well, I don't know. Scott Rayo said it and it means so much more. Like, what the heck, you know? And I think that's where external training is so beneficial, because you just hear it differently. You experience it differently. And it might be the same old, but when it hits, because Chris DeFurio said it at SCA at a course, it hits.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And I don't know, I'm just reminded of like Woods Coffee here locally. That's like a pretty growing chain. That whole like training, and also, which I think investing into your team, but also is somewhat synonymous. Well, not synonymous, somehow closely related to your company culture as well. plays a really big deal. And I think that's probably why they've become so big as big as they are, is because they just do a really good job at making sure baristas are engaging with customers the right way, making sure things are done in a certain way that ends up breeding this brand or this perception of your experience at Woods, or or like, I know this is like out of left field, but like, for example, like Dutch Bros, I don't know why they come to mind, but like maybe not the greatest, the tastiest coffee ever, but you got to give them, some roses, some flowers for the fact that they do have a perception, like they've built a perception of what your experience is going to be like when you get there.
Right.
And that comes from, it's not an accident. That literally comes from probably their leadership, how they're investing and what they're communicating to their employees, what they're saying to them, that ends up creating such an experience. Or, I mean, we all know Chick-fil-A, like, anyways, yeah, that's all. I know that wasn't related to like some practical tips, but I think it's like just adding on to the fact of like why even going out of your way to do those practical things, why this actually matters, like on a massive scale. Yeah. And if the people on a massive scale are doing it, then you should probably doing it with your one or two cafes.
At least give it some thought and like, why does it work in that context? Yeah. And how can it work in my context? Yeah. And I think in conclusion, I think one thing I would just leave every listener with is like, one, don't underestimate training. I've said that so many times throughout this episode. Don't underestimate that. But also realize that investing into your team is more than telling them how to pull a shot of espresso. Invest into your team in a way that matters for whoever you're investing into. Again, like you may be a manager, you may be on bar, but even if you're a barista and you have a manager, most likely you have an owner, or you're in coffee to some degree, there's someone that you can reach out to and be like, yo, dude, I want to be invested into. Yeah. And that's very helpful for a manager who may not see the value in that. Right. But also delivering, communicating, and be like, hey, like, I want this. How can I excel? But that, again, that goes back to our quote unquote leveling up series, which if you haven't listened to, folks, you should check it out for sure. Outside of that, hey, leaders in coffee, invest into your team. You will help that person level up.
You left that on like a high, like your tone of voice. I'm like, you're going somewhere. Was that it? Was that just done?
Do it,
like,
dude. Just send it. No, I think that's good. That's what's been on my mind, literally, like post the leveling up series, but also I'm training folks. I'm quote unquote investing into people and trying to figure out how to run multiple coffee companies, kind of ish thing, and it's a trip.
Yeah. Cool. Well, there you've heard it, friends, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. Share this with a coffee manager or owner. Give him just send him a link.
Send him a link.
Just
send
a link.
Him a DM, dude.
No comments.
No,
nothing. Just send him a link.
Copy paste, dude.
That's it.
Post
Copy
the link,
paste.
dude.
Yeah.
Put it in your status update.
Exactly. Alrighty, friends. As we always say, remember, reflect what's good.